Welcome. Just going to share my screen here. And we will get right into it here. Thanks for joining me for Adaptability, a scientific measure of health and well-being. My name's Alan Brown. I'm your host, and I've been a chiropractor for 25 years. And in my opinion, this is the best model of well-being, I think, in terms of measuring something and really going back to the new scientific understanding of what well-being really means. Hopefully you've joined up on our email list to get on and watch this, because there are some things we'll email you to some supporting information, because this is pretty streamlined to finish around that 35-minute mark. This information is obviously for our practice members, but also for anyone who's not under chiropractic care or comes to one of our clinics. It's going to be very useful whether or not you do that, because you can take on this information, measure your outcomes, and hopefully get some great results. I'd like to acknowledge this incredible man, Adrian Wemban, who has been a mentor of mine for years. He started using heart rate variability, or this simple protocol he developed, and from never doing a triathlon to then making the Australian team, coming 12th in his age group in the cross triathlon world champions. I mean, that's just one small thing that he's done, really. The guy's, he's done his usual chiropractic degree in science, and he also then did the epidemiology. But remarkably, he started his own college in Spain, and that's become world-renowned as a research facility. And they are doing some amazing research with chiropractic well-being and heart rate variability. And he's working with a world expert psychologist, and who's a renowned world expert in heart rate variability. And they're actually looking at how people get over diseases like cancer with higher heart rate variability, and they're seeing what chiropractic does with that, whether it improves that kind of thing. So there's lots of really fascinating things they're doing. All their students take ECGs of their patients, which is looking at that much more thorough measure of heart function and seeing what's happening with the heart rate variability. So we're going to talk about that, but I just wanted to give just that acknowledgement for Adrian, because we've hosted a seminar for him, for other chiropractors and health practitioners in Australia, and so I get all this research from him. So I'm really lucky in that sense. So moving right along there, how would your life look with better health? We've all got different things that we aim to improve, or that have the most, I guess, meaning to us. Better relationships, increased strength, agility, better concentration, more energy, better posture, heightened optimism, spiritual connection. These things are all really important when it comes to well-being. They're all equally important. And what is the best way to get there? What is the best way? How do you know your lifestyle strategies are actually working? So would you like to have the confidence in your health strategies that you use and know they are delivering the health you need? So what if I told you there's a metric that is measured easily and it's not expensive? I mean, how many things that are in the well-being industry that aren't expensive? Or the health industry, really, there's lots of things that are expensive. This is not expensive to do, but it is the most comprehensive biomarker of health longevity and performance. And using this metric, you could test your health strategy and know with certainty whether it's really improving your health. So the goals of this short, streamlined presentation is to understand this new scientific definition of health and well-being, and bringing in that concept of adaptability. or understanding the role of the autonomic nervous system and its cause is when you peel back all the layers of different problems we have about health, diseases, and so forth. Really, it gets down to this dysfunction of this thing of the autonomic nervous system as a root cause. And we want to look at how heart rate variability reflects how your autonomic nervous system is really functioning, and how to measure that. And then we're going to look at, some lifestyle factors, 10 particular ones that you can use to improve your heart rate variability. So let's look at what is health. Lots of us have probably seen this World Health Organization definition of health formulated back in 1948. And it was basically that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. It sounds pretty reasonable. But what they did, these scientists about a decade ago, they left the pharmaceutical industry out of their meeting, which I think is important when we're talking about well-being. So we're taking out pharmaceutical intervention. I mean, sometimes that can be a useful thing, but we're looking at what you can do from a lifestyle perspective to become as well as possible. And they found that just as environmental scientists describe the health of the earth as the capacity of a complex system to maintain a stable environment within a relatively narrow range, they proposed that health is the ability to adapt and self-manage. And they're two key points, adapt and self-manage, that are not mentioned in that first definition. So, and they're very, very important. So if we look at your health potential from birth, it really gets down to what you're biologically given, let's say your genetics, and what you personally acquire. And that becomes more and more important as we age, that personally acquired, those habits, those things that we do, those strategies. And so it's the sum of those two things. So health really is the demands of life versus those two potentials. And disease really is the result of the demands of life exceed our potentials. And obviously, living to our old age, we need to have those potentials exceeding the demands of life. So that's one really important concept. The next one is really this genetic fact of our evolution. And if we really reflect, we are the most adaptive species on the planet. And that comes from 360,000 years of adaptation to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Then we drop massively to 347 generations as agriculturalists, and then a tiny smidgen of industrialists, and then a couple of generations as digitalists. So really, we are this digital this new kind of version of humanity as a digitalist, but underlying that, we are hunter-gatherer. And so we need to find innovative ways to stimulate or awaken that hunter-gatherer makeup in our bodies to make sure that we're healthy. And so an example of this stuff is that, and there's lots of different studies going on that you won't see in the mainstream media, because they're kind of more about, I guess, let's focus on disease and I guess those sorts of other interventions around that. We took 11 subjects and they took them on this 10-day mimic of an ancient lifestyle. And basically anthropometrics is basically the study of look at all the different metabolic factors, like cholesterol and blood glucose, etc. And they took them on this ancient lifestyle. And basically what that involves is they have to walk to their water hole, they have to carry their bags, they have to hunt, they have to prepare their own food. They sleep by a fire when the sun goes down. So we're getting more in tune with those biorhythms of nature. We're walking to get food. So there's more movement, exposed to different temperatures. And all those factors I'm measuring, like BMI, waist, hip circumference, cholesterol, insulin levels, all of them improved in just 11 days. So it's an example of, using that sort of a lifestyle intervention can improve our health. So how do we put this in context? Like what's controlling the function of our body that makes this happen? And it's our nervous system. And it controls and coordinates all the organs and structures of our body, every cell. And really, this approach we're talking about of improving your well-being, it's not about treating disease, it's about focusing on building your healing capacity. Because we all know the story of the guy or the woman that we knew, and they looked perfectly fine, and then next week they got diagnosed with an illness or someone just dropped dead. And it was way before their age. It wasn't like they're 85 or 90 or whatever. So obviously health, disease, we often miss that in between disease part. Dis-ease, where there is dysfunction, but it may not be visible to the eye and we may not see it in terms of a symptomatic thing, but there's a loss of ease in the body. And so really we're trying to measure that ease or dis-ease in our body so that we can do something about it and push us back towards health and away from that process of disease. Because it is really when we're in this state of dis-ease that the chances of us getting a disease start to increase. This autonomic nervous system is a key component of the nervous system. So, and it gets broken down into two components: sympathetic and parasympathetic. And sympathetic is probably a component we're more familiar with, is that fight or flight stress response. And if you take it in the context of running for a bus, or you've got deadlines in the old hunter-gatherer lifestyle, that would have been more running from a threat, a wild animal, or another tribe or something like that. And it's needed for short-term survival. And that's a key point right there. Parasympathetic is more rest, renew, digest, repair. And it's essential for recovery. So after we've done that fight or flight, or we're running and we need to recover, our body's got to rebuild. And it's needed for long-term survival. Long-term versus short-term. So very important, the definition there, or the how we compare them. Now this picture we've just flipped, the parasympathetics on the left, sympathetics on the right. So looking at the right there, the sympathetic, imagine we've gone for a run, or we're up and moving, get on for the day, or we're running from a wild animal or stressful situation. If we're running, our pupils might dilate so we can increase that visual field, things moving towards us. We want to turn off salivation because we don't need to digest when we're running. The heart needs to pump and get blood out to the muscles. So blood is directed away from the digestive system. The airway is open so we can get more oxygen in to meet the demands of our nervous system and our muscle requirements. Glucose is released into the bloodstream, and the digestive movements, called peristalsis, where we get the intestines massage into the food to move it around the digestive system, and those secretions are inhibited, and so forth. We keep moving, and there's epinephrine and norepinephrine, all those things that get us firing, get secreted into the bloodstream as well. And obviously we want to turn the bladder off. We don't want to go and urinate when we're running. That would be a neat trick. So you get the idea. We've got that up and go. And then parasympathetic, if we go back onto that left side of the screen, we've got constricts pupils, stimulates salivation, slows the heartbeat, constricts the airways, inhibits that glucose production. And we're digesting things, we're repairing cells, and etc. Now, we need both of those things to be functioning, to be healthy. And so that both of them are always working at different levels, but we need flexibility, if you like, between both those for good health. And essentially, under stress, now we always talk about 3 types of stress, I guess, when we from a chiropractic perspective, and other philosophical approaches have said the same thing, is there's 3 main stresses: chemical, physical, and emotional. And those stresses can break down that like software of the processing within our nervous system, if you like, and so that information processing breaks down, and we get this thing called dysautonomia. And that just means that your autonomic nervous system is in dysfunction because it's overwhelmed by stress. And so think, like I said, that program, like a computer software or chip that it's getting overloaded. So the processing is now in dysfunction. It's not being effective because of the stress overwhelm. And so there's a loss of complexity. So the intelligence of the body is less able to cope with what's going on. And there's a ton of things that are, or list diseases that are strongly associated with this dysautonomia via research. Colic, enuresis, migraine, headaches, very common stuff. Parkinson's getting too common. Obviously, if you have a spinal cord injury, that damage, that inflammation then sets off this dysautonomia. Those abbreviations are IBS, FM, that's irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, all too common these days. And they are associated with that dysautonomia or dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. Rheumatoid arthritis, ADHD. We've got diabetes, asthma, high blood pressure, and you can see the list there. Now, another thing you may be familiar with, excuse me, is a thing called chronic inflammation. And, inflammation is a really important thing for our survival. If we get an infection, if we get like a wound or a cut, then the intelligence of our body, the nervous system says, hey, let's send blood to that area. Let's carry all the important cells to, break down damaged tissue and lay down some new tissue. Let's eat away any foreign bodies that we can take away and excrete out of the body. So really important and critical for survival. Unfortunately, again, our lifestyle can promote this thing called systemic chronic inflammation. Now, that again, like dysautonomia, is looked at that unifying sort of cause of many problems, and that's because they're related. So dysautonomia and chronic inflammation are very related, because behind chronic inflammation is essentially our autonomic nervous system not being able to resolve it in the first place. So it again, when you peel back the layers of all these problems you see, it ultimately gets down to the dysfunction of our autonomic nervous system. And so inflammation is, again, a problem of that. Now, let's look at rheumatoid arthritis. Autonomic dysfunction precedes the development of rheumatoid arthritis. Autonomic dysfunction precedes, means it happens first. But hang on, isn't that a genetic problem? So I guess the good example of this is when you look at genes, when you look at those fish there, would you say in discussing what the problem is there, would you say, oh, that looks like those fish had some serious gene problems right there? And of course you wouldn't. You would think about the environment first. You would think, is that water toxic? Does it have a poison in it? And if you look at our environment, it's what we eat, or what toxins we are exposed to in the air and the water, in our food, how we move and how we think. All of those things can be, how we think can be exceptionally toxic. So that's our environment. And it is there that really determines much of what happens to our autonomic nervous system and our ability to adapt to our environment. Heart rate variability we're going to look at now is this thing that we can measure the autonomic nervous system's ability to adapt. It's not heart rate. And so if we look here at 60 beats per minute, and the beats are an average of the beats of the heartbeats per minute. And you can see those spikes there on the diagram, and the top of the spike is basically where the beat is, and there are time intervals between those beats. 0.987, 1.9, 0.823. And these are variations of time between the beats. And that's what heart rate variability is. So we want to see variation to be healthy. And so simply it's the interbeat interval variability between successive heart contractions, not heart rate. Getting more complex, it is the change in time intervals between adjacent heartbeats, okay, as an emergent property of interdependent regulatory systems that operate on different time scales and adapt to environmental and psychological challenges. In short, all the different systems running, depending on what's going on in all of them, will be reflected in this thing called heart rate variability. It is an accurate, non-invasive, fantastic measure of your autonomic nervous system, which responds to everything: how you exercise, recover, sleep, eat, and perceive stress. And as you would expect, since dysautonomia reflects all those, diseases we mentioned before, or loss of well-being, because heart rate variability is a measure of that, then you would expect to see the similar things showing up in terms of, the same sorts of problems. And we can see we've got heart disease, cancer, chronic respiratory disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes. I'm going to talk about influenza a little bit in a second, nephritis, and interestingly, self-harm and suicide, massively, there's so much more of that now in our kids. And again, low heart rate variability relates to this stuff. So it's really holistic in the net that it casts. Now, I just mentioned about the flu, etc. Well, as you'd expect, COVID-19, one of the signatures of COVID-19 is this increases in C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is basically, found in a common blood test, and it tracks the inflammatory process. So anything to do with inflammation, heart rate variability will, as I mentioned, will reflect that. And so there's no surprises there that there's a decrease in heart rate variability that correlates to worsening of this disease state. And they found that there was a greater than 40% change or drop that preceded this 50% increase in that inflammatory response when the person had COVID. So again, a really important metric. So how do we measure it? What are we going to use to measure it? Look, there are a few things out there now on the market, and these are still the two that I recommend. The easiest way in is the HRV for training. All you need is the app on your iPhone. I won't go into all the models of the iPhone that you can use it for, but you can check on their website, and you'll get a link to that if you've signed up for our emails there. And we also give you the one to Elite HRV. Now, they're both pretty similar. You do need a sensor for Elite HRV, so you may already have a strap on your chest if you're a cyclist, etc., which will be able to transfer into Elite HRV. They also sell a sensor that you can buy, and it's about $200. So where HRV training is only $14, and that's for the lifetime. So it's a pretty easy cost to get up and running. Both are really useful websites. So now, what the point of taking a heart rate variability is that you want to work out what your normal is. What is your normal? What is your normal in terms of your autonomic adaptability, looking at HRV? And readings taken in isolation are less meaningful, particularly when we're going to use our phone. And we want to take it, over multiple days first to work out what our baseline is. And I suggest that you take it daily. I think that's the best way moving forward. I mean, it doesn't matter once you've got it up and running, but you really want to have that baseline, so you're doing it pretty regularly. This is on the HRV4 app, and you can see when you go to the menu there that you can jump on your history and a population comparison. And the good thing about this is that and what I would suggest is that you just have a look at how you're comparing to a healthy population of people who actually train. And because you wouldn't want to compare yourself to the average Australian or Western world person, because those averages, the average person gets, I think it's, 2 out of 3 get cancer. That is something, I don't want to compare myself to that. I want to compare to myself to people who are proactive and try and move up in that category, if that makes sense. So it's really useful there. Like I said, we want to take it every day. Once things get going, it doesn't matter if you miss it here and there, but generally you want to just get into the habit. It only takes a minute. Now, the key is with using your phone versus using a thing like an ECG, which is a really diagnostic thing that, someone like a GP or a cardiologist or a specialized physiologist may look at as from a diagnostic perspective. Obviously, that's a massive amount of data they take when they do that. We're taking, how could a thing on a phone compare to that? Well, it doesn't, but the thing that we're looking for, it does. So it's taking one of the metrics out of thousands of things you'd get off an ECG, and we're looking at one aspect of that reflects in how you're recovering. And that's really key, because we're going to see how you've slept, and we're going to talk about that. And the key thing is that an ECG, if you look at those heartbeats, we've got those little spikes you saw on the graph before. Well, obviously an ECG is way more accurate at picking the exact point of those peaks. But using the app, if you're doing it daily, it becomes more and more of a confidence thing, because it's the amount of times you're taking it. It becomes more predictable and accurate of what your baseline is. The key thing here is that you actually take it upon your waking from your longest sleep. So if you're a shift worker, then that would mean your longest sleep. And we're taking it in that first 30 minutes because we want to check how your parasympathetic has been since you've been sleeping. Remember, you might have trained or you've done something, and then how did you recover? How is your body ready to go? How much energy is in the tank? How much recovery has occurred? That's what we're looking for. That's what we're doing in that first 30 minutes. And it takes a minute. Now, the other key thing here is that we want to make sure that you do it repeatedly and, in a way that you're going to do time after time, because we don't want to change how you take the reading. So I just do mine lying down in bed. I grab my phone, turn it on, and then, turn the app on, take the reading, and I'm done. And it gives you an idea also whether you should train that day. So that's an important thing. There's different ways that you can measure heart rate variability. The one we're talking about with the phone is there's the bottom one there, the PPG sensor, which is basically just measuring the pulse through the blood flow using your light on your phone through your camera. And then that obviously goes into an algorithm that then is measuring the variability between heartbeats. Now, here are some of the self-care interventions that have been shown to help shift HRV. Breath work, hot, cold, posture, aerobic exercise, resistance, training, stretching, napping, hunter-gatherer experiences, self-guided meditation, massage of self, intentional sighing, being in nature, HRV biofeedback. That's where you use an app and you can actually measure how your heart rate variability is going, and then they might get you to breathe a certain way or do certain exercises to shift it in real time. Sense of community is, interestingly enough, I think the key thing for longevity. I think there's a lot of TED Talks on that. So having people you can count on is massively important. I mean, at the end of the day, we are a mammal, and we like that we like to be part of the group. That can be good and bad. Touch, the hygiene hypothesis. In other words, that whole there's bad bugs and good bugs things, germs, it's pretty misleading. And there's a balance there that's required. And we know the effects of antibiotics and what the devastation that causes to the digestive system. Same thing if we're not getting exposed to good bacteria on our food, in our gardens, and and then if we're having pesticides like Roundup, that's is showing more and more to be devastational to our gut health, which then affects our HRV. We do have certain things that there'll be links and certain things about our heart rate variability challenges, where you can monitor different strategies. The 10 things we have at the moment, and look, these are big topics. They're certainly not easy to cover in one module, but with exercise, for example, you can imagine how big that is. We're taking it really from an injury prevention way, where you're doing exercises that will maximize. Like, everything I'm giving you is going to be as streamlined as possible, and that's coming from a perspective that I'm trying to do all these things. You can imagine if you look at 10 topics there, okay, how are you going to do all that in a week? So you've got to make it in a very systematic way that is streamlined and is easy to adopt. And so exercise for me is to maximize what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and do it in the shortest amount of time possible for the maximum results, because I also want to meditate, and et cetera, and do, Wim Hof breathing and all these other things. So exercise is very much about an injury preventive approach, where you're trying to get, maybe get strength training and heart rate all in one go. And that's kind of what that module is about. The other important thing is, if you're into rowing, you're into golf, or you're into, mountain climbing, or, triathlons, then, the key for us, particularly as a practitioner, is to give you more of a baseline of a foundational thing that is going to make sure that it's going to keep you in good stead for doing those things. And that's really what our exercise module is about, those two things. Meditation, very big topic again, and I really think that it's a must. And we're just going through many different ways that you might approach that. So again, it's going to be the easiest way possible and to get on there, because it's hard, generally, I think, for a lot of people to take time out. Breath work, massively important in terms of, being efficient with breathing. It gets turned off too often under stress at work. And the quickest way in, again, and the most streamlined way, is absolute. Wim Hof is just so easy to demonstrate. There's an app there that he has done a beautiful job on, just getting you onto a method that quickly gets a result. And but there's a lot to it. But we're looking for the simplest method there. Cold exposure, I should write in there hot as well, because we have an infrared sauna at our Stafford clinic. I'd love to get cold exposure in there. It's a bit tricky at the moment, but to me, again, there's innovative ways to get that into your lifestyle that don't take a lot of time, but are very effective at getting your autonomic nervous system just switching on and doing something it wouldn't do normally. But genetically, it's wired to do that. And again, what the problem with a lot of what we're talking about when we're talking about our autonomic nervous system and it's that dysautonomia, is that our autonomic nervous system just hates being in neutral. And that's really what all this shows us. And so the more that we bring these things in to give it a stress, there's actually good and bad stress. This is like, you can do things in a good way and then expose your body to some stress, check out your heart rate variability and say, okay, you should recover today. And then we're gradually building that heart rate variability up, or your autonomic nervous system up, in terms of it loves certain types of stress. And this is what this is about, or flexibility within the system. So intermittent fasting, again, can be stressful, but we need to, and you may need to see a naturopath or someone to be able to fast. But if you go back 100 years, we were fasting whether we liked it or not. And so we're genetically made to do that. And there's lots of benefits, as you'll find, from doing it. Diet changes, supplementation, all massive topics, streamlined for helping your adaptability, gut biome. Like I've touched on that, good bacteria. I love that topic. It's one of my favorites. I love the fermenting foods, and I've seen people that have just done that alone and fixed up their kids' asthma and eczema and things like that. So we'll leverage on people that have done different things and experts in the fields of these things as well. Ergonomics, I've done an ergonomics course and really streamlined that, because to me, that is the biggest problem of stress for spinal stress and nervous system stress, because it's bad movement patterns and bad postures all rolled into one. So, and there's lots of innovative ways that you can change your workspace. Most of them low tech. Most of the exercise stuff is low tech too. Most of these things, I think, certainly supplementation can be expensive, but, most of these things are low tech. And, obviously, chiropractic, posture. I've put those together. Our module will show you ways, obviously, to consider improving your posture without chiropractic as well. But there are some things that simply need professional help to correct curves. And obviously, chiropractic from a spinal position, I mean, we don't work just in the spine. We work on muscles in certain ways because our end goal is to improve nervous system communication. That's going to be reflexes and organs, muscles, ligaments, all the joints in the body. And there's also emotional techniques. So look, we're pretty holistic with the stuff. I've just put chiropractic in there because there is a certain aspect of that with posture correction that, if that is the most evidence-based way that people are not aware of. And I go through some of the research on that too. So, there's certain things that are, good to understand. And obviously chiropractic also helps with heart rate variability. Or I wouldn't have probably got into this in the first place because I wouldn't have seen that link. Now, what to do next? Well, you're going to get, you can download that app already, but you'll get a link on that if you've signed up with this talk or this webinar, and start taking your HRV, get that baseline down. You look at some other emails about some of the interventions you can start now and how we go about measuring outcomes for that. And then you can start testing those lifestyle strategies. If you wanted to book in with us, obviously there's a website there. If you have any questions, you can book in through the websites there. Obviously we do the chiropractic thing, but we also do the lifestyle coaching with that. So stay tuned for future emails, and I appreciate your time. We've done that in about 35 minutes. I hope that was straight to the point. And again, we'll see you down the track. Thanks a lot for listening.